Speedometer problems on your Geo Tracker? I've got them too. Welcome back to the Auto Obscure Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project Back on Track. That is our 1995 Geo Tracker. On today's episode, guys, we take care of an issue that plagues a lot of these trucks, a lot of their Suzuki Sidekick brethren as well, the speedometer. Now, your speedometer might not work. Your speedometer might jump around. Your speedometer might scream at you like some kind of undead banshee in the night. That's exactly what mine was doing, unbearable at highway speeds. I'm going to show you today how to take care of that, either repair it or replace that cable. Maybe we'll try both. Why not? Let's get in the garage and get a little dirty. So I've got a new speedo cable for the tracker. There's the actual part number. I'm going to try to grease the old one before I replace it because I like to save the original equipment where I can. Let's crawl into the vehicle and I'll show you where it goes into the transmission. So I disconnected this automatic disconnect for the speedometer, which is interesting. I think this is a tow rig addition. So when you're towing, you can easily disconnect your speedo so you're not putting mileage on. They never did that. Kind of curious. They probably got this thing outfitted for towing and didn't want to crawl into here and do whatever the heck that does. Or maybe there's a button inside. I have no idea. There are some electrics going to it, so I'm kind of curious how it works. I have a feeling there's maybe like a disconnect inside that unit where it disconnects the speedo cable, but I'm unsure. I couldn't find too much information about it online. Definitely leave a comment if you guys know what that is. But it plugs right into the transmission. Right back. God dang, it is dark in here. Let me grab a light. Okay, we got some decent lighting under here now. You can see I disconnected the speedo cable from the transmission. There's that automatic disconnect piece sitting right up there. We'll undo the zip tie and backtrack all that wiring and take that off. But I'm gonna get in there, clean that hole up really good. There is like that corrosion in there I talked about. So we'll get in there with a little wire brush, clean it up as best you can, and then we'll use some white lithium grease to kind of grease it up, lubricate it in there, and do the same with the backside of the gauge cluster. But before we plug this wire back in after we're done cleaning it, we're gonna go ahead and leave it slack. That way we can pull it extra slack through the firewall and make it easier to pull our gauge cluster out. That's a little top tip there. Sometimes you remove the grommet, which we'll probably do where it goes to the firewall. That'll give us a little extra play too. Talk about your really easy stuff to film, laying on your back, holding the camera, getting a little wire brush out. We're gonna go around in here, kind of just get all that corrosion out of there. These little gun cleaning wire brushes are useful for jobs like this that are really tight. All right, I'm gonna put a little PB blaster in there just to kind of break down some of that crusty, rusty stuff. Gonna let that run out. Then we'll clean it all out and we will put some white lithium grease in there. All right, I've cleaned up all our PB blaster. It's time to put the white lithium grease in there. Here's what I'm rocking. As you can see, a little white lithium grease. Good for what ails you. In the immortal words of groundskeeper Willie from The Simpsons, to Lunch Lady Doris, grease me up, woman. Okay, let's get this grease in there. Yep, get it all smooshed up in there, doesn't matter, ain't not hurt nothing. And then we'll put a whole bunch on the end of the cable too that goes in there. I'm gonna pack some more grease in there, but you get the idea. Just put the white lithium grease to her. So we've got our automatic speedometer disconnect there on the ground. The positive is tied into that cable right there, that electrical wire anyway. So we're gonna go ahead and cut that open and then put those two wires back together, probably put a heat wrap on it to keep it safe under here. There's also a ground wire that comes off that white wire there, which goes, and there's like a little ground point up here. Yeah, I can feel it right there, you can see the jiggle in it. So we'll disconnect that and then we'll be able to free that device from the vehicle and our wiring will be back the way it should be. So let's do that first. I disconnected the battery just in case. I don't want to get electrocuted taking off this crazy automatic speedometer disconnect, whatever this ancient technology is. All right, so we've got our wiring all done. That automatic speedo disconnect has been removed from the vehicle. You can follow the speedometer cable right here. I've actually pushed the grommet from the firewall out here, and that way we can feed some more line this way towards the
instrument cluster, and that way when we pull out the instrument cluster, it won't be as tight. So a little tip there, so you can actually you can either pop it out of these little clips. Plus, pick the hardest one. Just pop it out of there, and then your cable will be slack. I mean, at this point, I feel like I almost want to replace the cable, but there's just something in saving something. So if I can lube it up and fix it that way, we're good to go. So let's go ahead and push that through the firewall a little bit, and then we're going to go on the inside of the car and pop that instrument cluster. So what makes things a little harder on this job is that pass-through through the firewall is on the passenger side, and the reason being is probably because most of these vehicles, were right-hand drive in many markets, so it makes sense that would go through because that's where the instrument cluster would be. But for us, that's behind the glove box, so it kind of goes back there and works its way around the back of the dash over to the gauge cluster. So kind of a pain in the butt, but let's go ahead and pull that gauge cluster out and see what we're working with.
Now it's a pain in the butt to pull the cluster through because of the steering wheel, but it's not actually a fixed steering wheel truly. There should be a couple bolts you can pull underneath here that can allow you to lower it a little bit. I'm pretty sure anyway, but you're gonna remove this little access panel. Pop it out of the way, and then you're looking up there, you're gonna find yourself some Torx bolts right there in blue. You got one on the other side here too. Those are T40s, so get yourself a handy dandy Torx bit, and we're gonna get up there and pull those out, hopefully lower the steering wheel a little bit. Now with both of those T40 bolts removed, the steering wheel has some play in it. As you can see now, I could probably, I don't know what exactly it's hooking up on. I could probably find that, probably some wires. But at least now, it has a lot more play when you try to squeeze that gauge cluster out. Every little bit helps. Also, top tip, push the hazard down. A little extra clearance. Let's just eyeball this right now. Oh yeah, we should be good. All right, time to get all the screws under this to get this gauge cluster out. We got 4 little Phillips screws to do. We got 2 underneath the gauge cluster, and then we have 2, just you can see them right in there, inside the cowl themselves. Let's pull those 4 out. Also see a little microphone right there, and I just noticed that this aftermarket stereo actually has a USB in right there and Bluetooth. So that'd be really killer if I can connect my phone to this and make calls out of this tracker. That's a sweet bonus. I'm usually an original radio guy, but that is kind of cool. Okay, let's get this cluster out. Once you get all the screws out of the gauge cluster, you kind of just wiggle it up here and pull that cluster frame out, set it aside nicely. And now we have the cluster itself, and there'll usually be some screws set back. You can see right here on the sides. There's 4 total. Let's get those out of there. Reminder, a magnetic tool is your friend for this job. You don't want to go diving for these screws behind your dashboard. So now after removing those 4 screws, you could start to pull that gauge cluster out. Go slow. There are some electrical connections. You should have more slack on those. And then go ahead and force your speedometer cable up through that firewall, and that'll give you more play too. You can see we can start pulling it out. But I'm gonna go nice and easy. I'm definitely not gonna film this one-handed. I wanna take my time with this and not break anything. So let's get this cluster out a little bit. Well, that's our problem. You can look down there. That is the end of our speedometer cable. Now you should see a little thin metal rod kind of sticking out of there, protruding from that connection. This actually goes and press fits on the back of the gauge cluster, which I'm going to show you in a second here, but you should see a little section sticking out, little metal section. It's completely gone. Now if you go to the back of our gauge cluster here, that's where it goes. And if you look in there, you can see there's some debris. It's pretty crusty looking in there, and eventually it would have failed completely. I don't know how it hadn't, maybe just taken it out. The little piece must have been resting in there enough so the speedometer was working. But that was making that awful noise. So it looks like it sheared off. We can probably get in here, clean really, really well. Might have to disconnect it and actually pull it out to clean it. But this old cable is no longer good for us. So good thing I do have that replacement cable. We're gonna do a whole cable replacement. Back of the cluster, there's 2 big white connectors, very simple, push down style. Now this third one with the pink and green watermelon theme wiring here, you actually have to pry up on the board. There's a little tab there. You actually push up with your finger and pull it out. So don't try to crush it with your hand. But yeah, that's how you get that out. And our cluster is completely free. I'm gonna start working on that speedometer section back here. Let me see if we can look at it. I've got some bright orange paracord I'm gonna use. Gonna tie this to the end of the old speedometer cable, and that way when I pull that cable back through the firewall,
this cord will follow the path for the new one to follow. So I'll have a whole length tied to the new one and should be able to just pull it straight through. Right, guys, this is just like going fishing. We're tied off to the Speedo cable. We've got plenty of slack in here. We let the line out. We're gonna hope to hook something big, probably like 190-pound dude. And I'm gonna pull this through the firewall. Let's see if this works. For some nice bonus content while we have the cluster out, I'm gonna hit it up with some plastics, Meguiar's. Give it a nice rub down. I love this stuff for restoring plastic. Boy, that is mirror finish clean. Look at that, guys. God, that looks good. Love that kind of stuff. Look how clear all of that instrumentation looks. Cool, nice little bonus. You can see our speedometer cable there in the firewall. I pulled the grommet out as you saw earlier. So I'm gonna gently as I can, fish that out slowly, making sure to avoid any snags, just constant even pressure, jiggling it to get it through the whole back of the dash firewall area. So let's try to get that old one out. Hopefully my knot on the paracord holds. And after what feels like way too long, you can see the plastic press-in fitting about to be pulled out. Hopefully my orange paracord is still attached. Let's give it a little yank. You can see my orange paracord. So in theory, I should be able to pull that through. I got a lot of slack on the other end and tie it to the new speedometer cable and work it back through. God, it's gonna be tricky going the other way, I just know it. Speedometer cable next to the new one. The old one had a plastic press-on fitting. New one has metal, which I do actually appreciate. Nice aluminum piece. This section does look the same. The screw-on portion matches the old one. I will be removing this old grommet that goes in the firewall off the old one, so I have to slide that off somewhere. So let's go ahead, tie the new one off, and you can kind of tie your twine or paracord through these little tabs on each side, and that'll give you your best grip. Sure, it makes it a little wider, but I want a good grip. I don't want that paracord to let go and have this be stuck behind the dashboard somewhere. We don't even want to think about that nightmare scenario. But let's tie our paracord through and then work it back through the system. The grommet doesn't fit over the cable. I actually cut it with a razor blade, nice clean cut. So when we do put it back in, it'll be pretty much as functional as it was before. So just a little top tip there to reuse your grommet, just do a razor blade slit down it. We'll put that back on the new cable. Using that bright orange paracord was actually a genius idea because now I can look under the dash. Look at that. And you can see, you might not be able to see perfectly, but it just tucks right back there through the firewall. You can see where it creeps up there. This is not that bad at all, guys. So actually, as I start pulling that paracord back through, I'm gonna work it by hand, all these little choke points where it can get hooked up on stuff. This should be pretty easy. The hardest part's gonna get it through that firewall hole, but man, I thought this was gonna be a way harder routing than it is. Okay, we'll go in the driver's door here and we'll start pulling our slack up. And then once the press-on end of that new speedometer cable touches the firewall, I'll go through and gently push that through. You can see our brand new speedometer cable right up against the firewall. I'm gonna push that through and my little bit of paracord, and then we should be able to guide it through hand by pulling through the dash area. Our paracord under the passenger glove box area. And here, God, the lighting is fantastic. You can see the metal end there. Awesome, we'll keep pulling. We'll get it to where the gauge cluster is. And now for a very happy moment, we have our speedometer cable into the gauge pod area. We need to go back now, very importantly, and make sure we have enough slack to connect the other end of the cable to the transmission. And you can see where it goes into the transmission there, full of that wonderful lithium grease. Here is the end of our cable here, speedometer cable. We have plenty of room, so I'm gonna go ahead and fit that in. It does have a certain direction it has to go in. We'll fit that in, tighten this down, and we should be good to go on this end. We got a speedometer cable secured in there. What a great aftermarket part. It fit in there perfectly. You have to find the little notch that goes in there, and then it tightened perfectly. The threads matched excellently. Solid fit. Got this one little spot to attach the cable. Actually, it's a little longer than the factory one. That's kind of nice. So we can pull a little slack through on the cluster side. And there's our new speedometer cable going through that grommet replaced. Looks wonderful, looks factory, everything fit nicely. Now to get our instrument cluster back in, I'm gonna press this brand new Speedo cable on first, and then we'll connect all the electrical connections, starting with this shorter one here, the little guy, and then we'll connect the two big white ones. Okay, we've got our gauge cluster seated in there nicely, everything's connected. I checked electrical, hooked up the battery, so everything lit up, which is a good sign. Now it's time to put that surround on. Right, our gauge cluster is in there nicely. Everything's secured, screwed in. We've tightened those 2 bolts, so it'll allow us to drop our steering column a little bit. Just gotta install this little plastic plate here. Lego truck, and we're complete. Speedometer cable is replaced. All that's left is a little testing. Well, as you can see, tricky to record this, sorry about the quality. The speedo is working. We're not screaming in the cabin. We're not hearing